Evolution or creation? There's a raging controversy in religious circles. Is it evolution or is it creation? Battle lines are drawn, tempers flare. In the words of Dr. Ben Carson, who is a noted pediatric neurologist, in his book, Take the Risk, he says, evolution and creation do not need to be mutually exclusive. My position is that evolution is fact, but it just does not occur by chance. Before we continue, I want to explain the difference between a creationist and an evolutionist. The creationist has a feeling, his theory is that dust is what was used by God to create a living animal. So we have some dust here, and somewhere in here is a living animal. Oh, voila, a sheep. This is kind of like the transporter in Star Trek, where suddenly these people just materialize out of dust. Now, the evolutionists hold that there's a single cell that becomes increasingly more complex into primitive animals and then more complex animals. So I have as a description this twig here, and so this base of the twig represents the single animal, and then I've picked this one that it divides into two, that we have the plant life here and then the animal life here on this side, and then it continues to branch out, and at the tips are the individual species. So we have a single cell that becomes increasingly complex. Now, there's problems with both of these viewpoints. The creationist ignores the groupings of animals, and these groupings help us as scientists understand the different species. I'm a veterinarian, and in veterinary school we dissected a dog as an example of a monogastric, and by learning about the dog we have learned about the cat and the rabbit and the pig and anything else that has a single stomach. And then we also dissected a cow, and the cow's a ruminant. It has 4 stomachs, and the cow served as an example so that we could learn about sheep and goats and camels and anything else that chews a cud. The fact that these animals bear similarities helps our understanding of relationships in anatomy and physiology, and also in diseases. We don't have to start from scratch each time we learn a new species. We can take what we learn in the one species and, in many cases, apply it directly to another species. Another example of the commonality of animals is in embryology. What is interesting is the embryo of a chick and a fish and a human all look alike in the very beginning. In my mind, this shows a common creation, rather than separate individual animals being created separately and distinctly from one another. Now, evolution implies, the theory of evolution implies that all of this occurs by chance. And by saying that, it implies, at least in my mind, that there is no God. So the theory of evolution holds that a new species are produced by chance mutations over millions of years. Now, this is believable with just high school biology or an introduction to biology class, but when you get into the higher level biology courses, this starts to come into question. And by the time you enter medical school or veterinary school, you just have too many questions. This is way too complex. And we can now credit the electron microscope with opening even new doors to the complexity of living things. Now, we do know that mutations occur, and examples of things that cause mutations are X-rays, the sun. Pregnant women are kept out of X-ray rooms because of the harm to their fetus. The sun can cause skin cancer, and that's a mutation in the cells of our skin. There are drugs that cause mutations. The thalidomide poisonings or the thalidomide use during World War II. And women were given this drug to prevent morning sickness and produce children that had shortened or absent legs and arms and fingers. These mutations are all harmful. So the question posed to the evolutionists is, can gradual change produce a new species? Now, we do know, if you start looking at the number of chromosomes in animals, that the horse and the donkey can interbreed, and it causes the animal that results is called a mule. Now, the horse has 64 chromosomes, a donkey has 62, and the mule has 63. All mules are females, and all mules are sterile. And this is because with the 63 chromosomes, they're not successful in producing eggs. And as I said, they're all females, so there are no males to be had at all. Now, what's interesting is the discussion of cats. The big cats or our domestic short-haired cats, short-haired or long-haired cats, all have 38 chromosomes. So this is interesting that the whole cat family has the same number of chromosomes. And it is possible for a tiger and a lion to breed together and produce viable offspring, and they're called ligers. And what's interesting is the female liger is fertile, but not when bred to another liger. You have to have a lion in the pen. So if you put your female liger in a pen with a lion, male lion, she's going to get pregnant and have kittens. And the kittens are not quite as healthy as other kittens, but she will still successfully produce a litter. Now, what's interesting is the male liger is, if not sterile, it's unwilling to breed. Now, returning to the Bible, I am most fascinated with the book of Genesis, and particularly the first chapter where the description of the creation occurs. Now, according to most theologians, Moses is the one that authored Genesis and authored the first chapter. Now, we do know that Moses lived 3,200 years ago. Now, think back to 3,200 years ago, and there were no microscopes. Now, imagine Moses being up on Mount Sinai, and God is trying to explain to him all the different things he did, like the Ten Commandments, but included in that, God's trying to explain to Moses the origin of the world and the origin of life. So God is trying to explain to Moses how atoms come together, and there's a nuclear fusion and this great big energy, and Moses is sitting there going, huh? What? So God says, okay, Moses, let there be light. And Moses says, good, I understand light. I got light. Then God goes on to explain how the earth came together. Moses says, good, I've got that. I can see the earth. And water? Oh, yeah, I got that. There's water. Then God goes on to try and explain to Moses that there's microscopic life in the water. And Moses is going, huh? What? Microscopic? Tell me, what do you mean? God says, okay, don't worry about that. So I make dry land appear. This is God. I make dry land. Moses says, good. I've got dry land. I can see dry land. And then there are fish and birds. Okay, Moses says, yes, I've got that. I see the fish. I've gone fishing. And oh, yeah, I see the birds. And they're out there flying around. And I find at this point in time, this is pretty fascinating. Because the current thought right now, the theory of evolution will have fish first. But the my idea was the next thing that happens, the fish crawled out on dry land, and now they become land animals. But actually, the Bible mentions birds next. And current thought is that birds are the descendant of dinosaurs. So actually, birds are more primitive than our other land animals. And this fits in with Genesis, written 3,200 years ago. Now hang on a moment, this is getting to be a little more spooky. But then the next thing that happens is animals are created. Moses says, yeah, I got animals. But if God tried to explain to Moses how these animals were developed through DNA, Moses would say, okay, God, forget this. What's DNA? God says, okay, I just created the different animals. Moses says, yes, I've got that. Now, after animals, then comes man, and that's consistent with the theory of evolution. That order is the right order. Now, Darwin noticed that natural selection occurs, and this is absolutely fact. There are great diversity within a species, and selective breeding is done to create new varieties within a species. We can select for a certain trait and breed it in and have it perpetuate. One of the biggest examples of selection is in the dog species. The dog is the single species with the greatest diversity. Now you're saying, oh no, in birds, but those are different species. I'm talking within a single species, and that's the dog. And the dog can range from 3 pounds as a teacup Chihuahua to close to 200 pounds as a Great Dane. So there's clearly no dispute that natural selection occurs within a species. But to create new species, can this occur by chance? Or is there something bigger, like an act of God, to create a new species? Now, as we're thinking of creating a new species, stop and think. This is occurring at the level of the DNA within the embryo, and something tweaks this new species to be formed within as an embryo and be born. And that animal could be male or female. And now the same tweak has got to occur another time to produce a female, or you've got a single animal that somehow can divide in two, like bacteria. I just don't think that's going to happen. Imagining a cat dividing into two. No, you're going to have a male cat, and you're going to have a female cat. So who's doing this? Is this chance? Or is this something bigger? Is this bigger thing, do you want to call it God? Do you want to call it Mother Nature? Do you want to call it a life force? Do you want to call it Yahweh, Allah? Something big comes into the cell to change it at the DNA level. The danger of insisting that evolution is totally by chance is the danger of saying, if evolution occurs by chance, where's God? Is there a God? And to me, that's sad. I'm asking you today to not separate God and science. In my mind, God causes science. God is the ultimate scientist. It is my prayer today that you can see God in science and science in God. In conclusion, I truly believe in evolution. We came from a single cell. We are primates. We are mammals. We are members of the animal kingdom. We did not get here by chance. Thank you for listening.